Our first major tournament for the Wisdom of Sea and Sky in Pokemon Pocket is in the books. So let's go ahead and take a look at the best and most popular decks from this first weekend and maybe see what conclusions we might be able to draw about where this metagame is going to head in the future. Our starting metagame distribution was actually pretty diverse, with 6 different deck lists having a 5% or more metagame share, with Silvally Oricorio being the most popular at 11%. To talk about the strength of these decks, I like to draw a comparison between this starting deck distribution and the distribution of decks that had a 75% or higher win rate after 8 rounds of Swiss. To draw this strength conclusion, I like to use a measure I call the performance delta, which shows how much each deck increased or decreased its metagame share between these two groups. This leads us to the conclusion that Sylveon Espeon was one of our best performers this week, increasing its 4.5% starting metagame share to a whopping 9.5% among our top performing decks. Our other best performers are Darkrai Giratina, increasing their meta share by 90%, Buzzwole increasing by 68%, and Silvally Oricorio increasing by 55%. Flareon Leafeon was relatively flat, staying dead even, while Crobat Sylveon, Greninja Sylveon, and Charizard Sylveon all decreasing their share between these two groupings, meaning the rare candy Sylveon powered deck list had a pretty rough first tournament overall. Moving into deck list specifics, we start with the Sylveon Espeon deck, which looks to be the new consistency powerhouse in the metagame. You have Sylveon to allow you to draw through your deck more frequently, and because Espeon is the other evolution you're pairing it with, you can attack with either of these for really efficient amounts of damage for 2 energy. You also have very serviceable baby Pokemon here, with Espeon being really solid into opposing Giratina decks, hitting for massive amounts of damage for 1 energy, and Baby Sylveon allowing you to clear out opposing copies of Oricorio really efficiently, and also hit for bigger bursts of damage when that's necessary. One of the big strengths of this deck is the fact that all 4 of its basic Pokemon can evolve into all 4 of its stage 1s, meaning you have a lot less wrong half problem that evolution Pokemon Pocket decks typically have. Looking into the matchup tables for the tournament in this deck list, it looks like its strong performance was largely on the back of a fantastic Buzzwole matchup, winning that one over 70% of the times. It was relatively even against Silvally Oricorio, but it did struggle against Darkrai Giratina, which I think makes a lot of sense to me. Your hitters here, even when you have a giant cape on them, only have 160 points of life, meaning a couple of Darkrai chip shots and a big Giratina blast sends them to the knockout zone. Darkrai Giratina has been a metagame fixture since these 2 cards were added to Pokemon Pocket, and our latest expansion is no exception. The fact that you simply playing 4 powerful basic Pokemon gives you a whole glut of powerful utility cards, with things like Silver being a new addition to their grouping. It also means your deck's just hyper consistent because you're not looking to assemble multiple cards to get your Pokemon online. As far as matchup tables go, Darkrai Giratina is predictably bad against Buzzwole, which is one of the reasons why that archetype is popular. It's relatively even into Silvally Oricorio, and this is largely why you see the 2 copies of Rocky Helmet here as being really important, because those in tandem with Darkrai Chipshot allow you to actually work your way through opposing copies of the Yellow Chicken. The big strength of the Darkrai deck, and likely why it saw such a big performance this weekend, is it's absolutely dominating most of these Sylveon decks. Sylveon Greninja, Sylveon Espeon, and Sylveon Crobat all have incredibly poor matchups into Darkrai Giratina, with Crobat Sylveon actually losing to it almost 80% of the time. Buzzwole definitely seems to have positioned itself as the anti-meta pick. It is favorable into Darkrai Giratina and incredibly strong against Silvally Oricorio variations. It also comes out ahead against things like Sylveon Greninja. It does struggle, however, a bit against the Espeon Sylveon deck that had a strong performance this first weekend, and it's relatively even into things like Crobat Sylveon. No real new pieces of technology from our latest expansion for this archetype other than Silver as a new disruptive card. I'm going to be curious to see if Silvally Oricorio can maintain its top metagame percentage as this format develops more. It's incredibly poor against the Buzzwole variations and is only even into Darkrai Giratina. A lot of this deck's strong performance delta this week is on the back of beating things like Crobat Sylveon and Charizard Sylveon, which had pretty rough weeks overall. So if those decks end up falling out of the metagame a little bit, the things that this build is really preying on will be going away, meaning it's probably in for a rough future. While Flareon Leafeon had a relatively flat performance overall in our first major tournament, I think it would actually be the deck to watch coming out of this first weekend. Looking at its matchup tables, this deck list matches up very strongly into Darkrai Giratina and Buzzwole Pheromosa, which are some of the best performing decks in this first weekend, and it's relatively even against Espeon Sylveon, which was the third best performer as well. It does struggle a little bit against Silvally Oricorio, so perhaps if this deck becomes more popular, that could leave that one breathing room to still exist in the metagame. From a pure theory standpoint, I think this matchup table makes a lot of sense. Flareon in particular, especially in tandem with Bag and Red, is phenomenal into opposing Pokemon that have 140 HP, allowing you to clear them in a single go. You also have that consistency element that we talked about with the Espeon Sylveon deck, where all four of your basics evolve into all of your different stage 1 evolution Pokemon, meaning you have a lot less wrong half problem these evolution decks typically have in this game. I'll be interested to see if perhaps this deck list develops to play a second baby evolution, allowing you to have more utility into the Oricorio matchup, which was its most challenging among the popular archetypes. While Crobat Sylveon technically underperformed by only a small margin in our first major tournament, it's one that I think has some of the roughest matchup tables overall, given the popularity of things. It only won about 20% of its matches against Giratina Darkrai, and it was only 30% against Silvally Oricorio. Its best matchup among the more popular decks was against Buzzwole, where it only went about 50%. This archetype also had an incredibly bad time against Espeon Sylveon, which was our top performer this week, meaning it's likely going to be increasing in metagame share overall. The places where this Crobat variation had a good time were against things like Charizard Sylveon, which isn't a very popular deck and had a worse performance this week than this one did even. Sylveon Greninja is unfortunately a similar story to Sylveon Crobat, only this one has slightly different matchups against the top decks. Its Buzzwole matchup is absolutely abysmal, as is its Darkrai Giratina, but it's relatively even into Silvally Oricorio. This deck list honestly doesn't have a strong matchup against any of the things that were terribly popular this week, with the exception of Flareon Leafeon. So if that deck list became a force, perhaps this could be a counter pick, but I'm skeptical that this one will be a good choice moving forward, given how poor it is into both Buzzwole and Darkrai. Despite its overall poor performance in this first major tournament, I think Charizard Sylveon could be one to keep an eye on for, or is simply reasonable to play if you really enjoy it. In particular, it has relatively even matchups into Darkrai Giratina as well as Espeon Sylveon, which were our two best performers this weekend. It's a bit favored against the Buzzwole variations, and it's only a little bit behind against Silvally Oricorio, in no small part due to the fact that Baby Flareon allows you to clear out the yellow chicken in one clean shot. Among the newer decks, one noteworthy callout is that this archetype has a really bad time into Crobat Sylveon, so that could be an organic counter pick if Charizard Sylveon did become more popular in the future. Finally, I wanted to cover a handful of deck lists that had a number of people playing them, but they weren't quite popular enough to give us statistically meaningful sample sizes to have data-driven conclusions from. The first of these is this baby-powered Silvally Darkrai variation that had 23 people play it, the best of whom finished 10th in our big tournament. I think this seems like an excellent theory craft shell for the baby Pokemon, who in particular want to go baby Pokemon into one pointer into an EX finisher. The babies also work organically with both of your attackers here. When you're going first, Magby or Pichu can set up Silvally to attack for 100 on the second turn of the game. And when you're going second, Darkrai actually can attack with a colorless energy in its 3, meaning you can go attach a dark energy to Darkrai, Magby or Pichu, put another energy on it, and then on the second turn, your Darkrai can be hitting for 80 with its attack, plus its constant flow of chip shots. Our other new deck idea that had a handful of folks playing it, the best of whom finished in the top 32, is this Oricorio variation featuring Zeraora and Tapu Koko and Arceus as finishers, alongside our new card Elemental Switch, as well as Electrical Cord from our previous expansion. The basic idea here is relatively straightforward. You've got efficient one-pointers to start with, and then Elemental Switch as well as Electrical Cord allow you to leverage the extra energy that Zeraora is bringing to the field to allow you to hit hard and fast with your bigger EX finishers, either at the very start or the end of the game. One thing that I do think is interesting here is the split between Tapu Koko and Arceus. I suppose the one upside to Tapu is that it has a lower retreat cost, letting you pivot into things like Oricorio or Zera more efficiently when you get stuck with an EX as your lead. While I'm certainly a little bit biased because of my joy I find in Gen 2 Pokemon, I think the Wisdom of Sea and Sky expansion for Pokemon Pocket is their best card release this year, and honestly, maybe ever. It feels like it not only gave us new EX Pokemon that are worth exploring and powerful, but it also added a number of tools like Elemental Switch in that last deck, for example, that made previous things from our earlier expansions worth revisiting and exploring. If you're looking for some off-meta deck lists that can potentially attack this field efficiently, make sure you check out yesterday's new decks roundup where I called out more unique decks that spiked individual tournament results. Also, make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you're new, because we'll be exploring lots of deck highlights with other things and testing lots of things, some of which will be less successful on the live streams here. As always, if you appreciate my roundups, make sure you smash the like button, and I would love to hear from you in the comments down below which of these deck lists have been working for you or not, and why, as you climb your way up to Masters this season. As always, I appreciate everybody that made it all the way through to the end of the video, and I hope your next pack is an excellent one.